Here's a third one. It's in Psalm 32. Just 17 Psalms over. Look at Psalm 32, verses 8 and 9. I love this. It's in one of the hymns that Paul was having us sing. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. Now here's the rest of the verse, verse 9, or the rest of the idea. Don't be like the horse or the mule, who have no understanding, who have to be harnessed with bit and bridle, or else they will not come near you. What's the character essence that should be in the life? I call it submissiveness. Submissiveness. Now, did you catch what it is? It says, don't be like an ox or a mule. God says, I will guide you with my eye. Now this is an example. Happened all week long. We have this flaming inferno in the middle of our campground. And I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 14, now 15, and a 16-year-old. And I don't worry about the top 5, but it's those bottom 3 I worry about with that 1,200 degree or whatever the temperature of a red-hot infernal fire is. And the goal is this. When they come walking up with that stick in their hand, every one of them have been taught to glance at us. And when they glance at us, we just look at them and we go. And right there is that moment. They stand there and they process that. And either they're choosing to be a mule or an ox, or they're choosing to be guided with the eye. Here, think of this. While living with my parents at home, I need to learn to obey their instructions and do what I know they expect of me, even when it's not mentioned. This helped me not to force them into repeated reminders, which I sometimes call nagging. That's the way one author put it. You know what we teach the children when they're little? We don't threaten, we don't repeat, we don't over-discipline them for a minor thing, but we teach them that sensitive, submissive look. Because if they will learn to look and seek your approval, then soon you will put that look of approval off from you who, by the way, I'm not omnipresent. When I was little, I used to think my mother was. I thought she was all-seeing. But what she was teaching me was that God was all-seeing. Do you know how this affects you? My mother always said, John, if you do such and such a things, I will find out. God will let me know. I remember the first time I lived several summers in Europe, and I was on missions teams. And I remember one time I was in this 120-room chateau somewhere in Austria with a missions team. We were using part of it. And I remember being there, and I remember that a situation came up where I came to my room in that chateau, which happened to be just a little tiny library thing. And they had given me this little roll-out cot, and I had rolled my cot into this little tiny library room, and I unrolled it and set it in there, and I went off down 2 floors to where the showers were, and when I came back as a 21-year-old college student to my room, sitting on the cot was a young lady from a Canadian team. And I opened the door, I looked at her, and I said, oh, excuse me, this is my room. She says, I know. I want to stay here tonight, too. Man, I was in Austria. I didn't know a single person in Europe. I was 21. And she was young. She was, I think I knew what she was thinking about. And in that instant, the verses that I had learned my whole life came to my mind. And it came right out of my mouth. I'll always remember what I said. I looked at her. I said, I will set no wicked thing before my eyes, and let those that name the name of Christ depart from iniquity. And I had the audacity. I reached in and got the end of my cot, and I pulled it out. I pulled it right out of the room. And you know what she did? She slammed that door, and I got a letter. I was a student then, a graduate student at Bob Jones University. I don't know how she got my address. I got a letter from her at Bob Jones about 5 months later. She said, I sat on the cots of 12 seminary students, and you were the first one that pulled your cot out and didn't stay. That has nothing to do with me. It was a lot to do with God teaching us to look back at the psalm. I instruct you and teach you in the way you shall go. I will guide you with my eye. Don't be like the horse or the mule, which have no understanding, which have to be harnessed. I mean, they have to walk around with a bit and bridle on, or they'll just unleash all of their desires. God says, teach a young child from their very youngest days to be guided with the eye, so that God can guide them with the still small voice of His Word, and that they will know. Did you know a child should grow in the awareness of what a parent expects, and before the parent even says it, they should say, I know that that's what you want me to do, and I will do that. That's a submissive spirit. I always remember when I was on staff with Dr. MacArthur, he said to me, do you have any friends at Bob Jones? I said, why? He said, because I can always loosen someone up, but you can't ever tighten people. He says, you guys have been brought up in such a disciplined way. He says, I can teach them more of their liberty, but he says, you can never take away people that are over-liberated. He says, give me some more of those disciplined people for staff. Have you ever thought about teaching your children to be submissive? And children, have you ever thought about true submission is responding to your parents' eye, and beyond that, knowing what they expect from you and doing it before they even ask, so they don't have to ask and ask and ask? That's the mark of a submissive person. That is an evidence of the Spirit of God. It says in James chapter 3 and verse 17, the wisdom that is from above, that God gives, is first pure, then peaceable, then gentle, then easily entreated. It doesn't have to be nagged. It's submissive. Now, by the way, that's totally paradoxical to our culture. Nobody is submissive nowadays. Everybody does it their own way, and they're their own person, and they're their island, but that's not God's way.